She listened to the street musician every day. But one day, she didn't show up. What he did afterward shocked the whole town. Subscribe and write in the comments, where did you start watching? The Morning City was a living machine, hissing, rushing, indifferent. People flowed out of the metro station in a steady stream, a parade of coats and coffee cups, of impatient steps and phone screens. No one looked sideways. No one paused, except for one man sitting cross-legged on a thin wool blanket, his back resting against the cold, graffiti-tagged wall of the metro entrance. His fingers danced over the battered neck of a guitar whose varnish had long since flaked off. Luca had been playing at that corner for over a year. His name, barely remembered even by himself, hadn't mattered in a long time. He was a man in his late 30s, hair grown out of habit rather than style, beard speckled with silver and grime. His coat, too big and worn down to its threads at the elbows, carried the faint scent of the underground, dust, rust, and the sour edge of forgotten things. Yet every morning, at exactly 8:02 a.m., he was there. Same corner, same guitar, and always the same kind of music. Melodies that floated up like smoke from the ruins of something beautiful, not perfectly played, but true in a way most things in the city no longer were. He didn't play for money, not really. People did toss coins, some out of guilt, some out of politeness. But he didn't watch the hat on the pavement. He watched the strings. He listened to what the chords whispered back to him. The music was all he had left. It was memory and hope and confession folded into notes. It was the only way he still knew how to speak. There were days when his fingers trembled from cold or hunger, and he would fumble a chord. Other days the music would pour out so vividly he thought it might lift him into the sky. On those rare days, a few strangers might stop for a minute, nod along, even offer a few claps before vanishing again. But mostly, he was invisible. Then, one Tuesday, something shifted. A small girl appeared, standing a few feet away, her backpack slung crooked over one shoulder. She must have been no more than 7, maybe 8. Skin the color of dark chestnuts, hair pulled tightly into beaded braids that clicked softly when she moved. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just stood, hands in her coat pockets, eyes fixed on Luca with a quiet intensity. Luca noticed her mid-song and thought she might be waiting for someone. He kept playing, finishing the piece with a soft, descending chord. Still, she stood there, watching. He gave a small nod, the closest thing to a greeting he could manage. She didn't respond, only tilted her head slightly, as if listening even after the music had stopped. The next day, she returned. Same time, same spot. And the next. At first, Luca thought it might be coincidence, but she was always there, always alone, always silent. After a week, he began to expect her. Her presence, still and curious, became part of his rhythm. He didn't know her name. He didn't ask. But he began choosing songs she might like. Softer ones, lighter ones, even silly ones. She didn't laugh, but he thought he saw her foot tapping once. Then, one morning, after he finished a rendition of Yesterday, she stepped forward and placed something on the ground before him. A chocolate bar, its wrapper slightly torn at one corner. Then she turned and left without a word. Luca stared at the gift as though it were a sacred offering. He hadn't tasted chocolate in months. But more than that, the gesture, the silent kindness of it, cut through something in him. He picked it up carefully and whispered, "Thank you," though she was already gone. From that day on, the music changed. He began to play with something more than memory. There was warmth now, a flicker of color in the gray. He started to imagine what songs she might want to hear. He invented little melodies just for her, simple and bright, as if he could pull joy out of the air just to make her smile. He wasn't sure if she smiled, but she listened. Over the next few weeks, Luca and the girl developed an unspoken ritual. She would arrive at 8:05. He would nod. She would sit on the curb, knees tucked to her chest, and listen until the bell of a distant school called her away. Sometimes she brought a flower from the roadside, sometimes a juice box or a note scribbled in colored pencil. "You are really good," one said. Another had a picture of Luca with his guitar, smiling beneath a blue sky. He kept the drawings in the inside pocket of his coat, folded like treasures. For the first time in years, Luca began to feel noticed, not pitied, not ignored, seen. That tiny audience of one gave him back something he'd thought lost forever, a reason. And she too changed. She sat closer now. Sometimes she mouthed the lyrics, especially when he sang Beatles songs or lullabies. Her eyes lit up when he played faster rhythms. Once, he sang a funny nonsense song and thought he heard her giggle. It was the first time he'd heard a child laugh in what felt like a lifetime. He still didn't know her name, but it didn't seem to matter. One morning, she came early, before Luca had even finished tuning his guitar. She waited patiently, hands clasped, then said quietly, "Can I try?" Her voice was soft but clear. It startled him, not because it was the first time she spoke, but because it felt like a bell ringing in the fog. He nodded and gently set the guitar on her lap, holding it steady. Her fingers were small, uncertain. He showed her how to place them, how to strum. Her face was pure concentration. The sound she made was clumsy, a half-formed chord that buzzed with mistakes. But to Luca, it was the most beautiful thing he'd heard. She beamed. "It's hard," she said. "You'll get it," Luca replied, smiling. When she left that day, she turned back and waved. He waved back. That night, Luca sat in his room, a cramped, windowless space he'd rented with the last of his day's coins, and played the melody she'd tried to pluck. He built it into a lullaby, soft and sweet, like the early light of morning. He would play it for her tomorrow, because tomorrow she would come again. He was sure of it. And she did, every day, always, until the day she didn't. The city wore a softer face when the music played. Not everyone noticed, of course. Most still rushed past the metro station, faces buried in coats and screens, lives packed too tightly with urgency to pause for stray notes in the wind. But something subtle had shifted. People no longer merely ignored the man on the corner. They sometimes turned their heads. Some even stopped. A few began to return. It started, of course, with the girl. She began coming not just as a listener, but as a participant. The first time she touched Luca's guitar had opened a quiet door between them. From then on, she sat closer, asked questions. Timid at first, then with more spark. "Why does this string sound deeper?" Or, "Can I play that song too?" Luca, who had long since forgotten how to teach, found himself remembering. She was quick to absorb, clumsy in execution, but eager and full of something precious, wonder. He began to teach her. Not like a school teacher, Luca had never been good at structure or instruction. Instead, he handed her moments. A single chord, a melody line, a simple rhythm she could keep by tapping her foot. Sometimes he'd hold her hand and guide her fingers to the right frets, strumming for her until she caught the shape of a sound. When she got it right, she would look up at him as if he'd just handed her the sky. "Your fingers are faster than mine," she'd giggle. "They've had more time to learn," he'd reply. Luca didn't know her story, not in full. She spoke little of home and never about family, But through the silences, he pieced together a fragile portrait. A single mother working long hours, school bullies who mocked her braids, an apartment where the lights flickered and the fridge was often empty. Music, for her, was an escape. With Luca, she didn't have to be small or quiet. She could simply be. And he could be useful, present, alive. One day, she told him her name. Aisha, she said simply as she handed him a crumpled sheet of notebook paper with stick figures drawn beneath a crooked rainbow. He nodded solemnly. That's a beautiful name. Means a life, she said, beaming. The name stayed with him like a refrain. He began writing new melodies with it in mind, little flourishes, hopeful ones. The kind of music he used to dream about when he still believed in record deals and studio lights. He no longer played only for survival or memory. Now he played for her. The change didn't go unnoticed. One Thursday morning, a young man with a phone stopped in front of Luca and Aisha during their impromptu duet. They were playing a nursery tune, Aisha humming along off-key but joyfully, Luca laughing between verses. The man smiled, tapped record, and posted the clip online. The video was short, just 45 seconds, but it caught fire. The title was simple: Street Musician and Little Girl Bring Joy to the City. Within hours, it had thousands of views. By evening, it was on the local news. Luca didn't know any of this at first. He didn't own a phone, but the next morning, a woman approached with her child and said, "I saw you online. You're amazing." She dropped a $10 bill into his case and smiled. Then another person, and another. The stream of people thickened. They didn't just walk by, they stayed, they listened. Some filmed, some clapped, a few even danced in place. Luca's hat on the pavement filled faster than ever before. He was stunned. Aisha was delighted. "See?" she said one morning, munching on a muffin someone had handed her. "Told you were good." He laughed. "Maybe it's you they came to hear." She shrugged, grinning. "We're a team." The team became something of a fixture. Every morning, people came not just for music, but for the sight of a rough-bearded man and a bright-eyed girl playing as though they'd known each other forever. Luca bought a small second-hand ukulele for Aisha, painted it with bright swirls of blue and gold. She named it Sky. They began practicing little duets, call and response melodies, clapping games turned into rhythm tracks, old jazz standards Luca adapted for her tiny fingers. Sometimes they sang together, Aisha's sweet, untrained voice floating above Luca's worn, soulful one like a paper kite. One particularly warm morning, a man in a suit approached as Luca packed up. "You ever think about playing inside?" he asked. "I manage a cafe not far from here. We host live music Friday nights. Would love to have you." Luca blinked. "Me?" The man nodded. "You're good, and people know you now. The video's all over the place. Name's Carter. Give me a call." He handed Luca a card. Luca held it like it might burn him. That night, he sat in his rented room, no bigger than a storage closet with peeling paint and a cracked window, and stared at the card for hours. He hadn't been on a stage in years. Not since the night his band fell apart when the label dropped them and his girlfriend left the same week. Not since he'd pawned his first guitar to pay for rent and a bottle of something to forget. He was afraid. Not of failure, exactly, but of hoping again. The next morning, he told Aisha about the offer. She looked up at him and said simply, "You should go." "What if I mess it up?" "You won't," she said, serious. "I'll be there." And that was enough. He called the cafe. The performance was scheduled for the following Friday. In the days that followed, Luca practiced more than he had in years. He retuned his guitar, rewrote old songs, stitched together a set list. Aisha helped, giving opinions with the solemnity of a producer. That one's too slow. This one makes me feel like dancing. That one sounds like you're flying. On the night of the show, Luca stood backstage behind a velvet curtain, hands shaking. The cafe was cozy, warm with lights and chatter. He peeked out and saw her, Aisha, sitting at a front table with a glass of juice, legs swinging beneath her chair. She waved. He walked onto the stage and took a breath. Then he played. He played like he hadn't in a decade. The music poured out of him, raw and full and golden. The room hushed. There were no missed notes, no stumbles. Just Luca, his guitar, and the memory of every morning by the metro, every flower left at his feet, every time Aisha had said, "Again." When he finished, the cafe burst into applause. Luca blinked back tears. Then, leaning toward the microphone, he said softly, "There's a little girl in the audience tonight. She's the reason I'm here. She listened to me when no one else did. This last song is for her." It was a lullaby, the one he'd written after her first strum on his guitar, gentle, full of light. When he looked out, Aisha was glowing. After the show, a woman from a record label approached him, offered him her card, said words like demo, recording, and potential. Luca smiled, thanked her, and slipped the card into his pocket. But that night, as he walked home through the quiet city, he took out Aisha's latest drawing from his coat, a stick figure of him on a stage with a tiny girl beside him, both smiling. He didn't need a contract yet. Tomorrow morning, he would be at the Metro, because that's where the music still began. It was a gray morning, the kind where the clouds seemed heavy enough to bruise the sky. Luca arrived early that day, earlier than usual. His guitar case still creaked at the hinges as he opened it, the familiar scrape echoing against the concrete walls of the Metro entrance. He tuned his strings slowly, his breath misting in the cool air. He looked up every few minutes, eyes scanning the stairwell that descended from the street above. It was 8:03. Aisha was usually there by now. He told himself not to worry. Kids ran late sometimes. Maybe her class started earlier today. Maybe her mother had decided she should stay home. Maybe. He shook his head and began to play, choosing a melody Aisha liked, something upbeat, the rhythm of clapping hands and skipping feet. It felt hollow without her sitting at the curb, bobbing her head to the beat, her braids swaying in time with the music. Still, he played. She'd be there any moment, he told himself. But she didn't come. He waited. He played another song, then another. By 9 a.m., Luca had begun to feel something colder than the wind nibble at his ribs. He told himself she was sick, just a cold. He'd see her tomorrow. But the next day, she didn't come, nor the day after. Each morning, Luca returned. He played the same songs. He watched the same staircase. He sat in the same spot, guitar perched across his knee like a memory waiting to speak. But there was no Aisha. He didn't talk about it. Didn't tell the cafe manager who greeted him on Friday night with compliments and congratulations. Didn't tell the woman from the label who left another voicemail. Didn't mention it to the growing group of listeners at the metro station who now clapped and took photos and called him the guy with the kid partner. He smiled at them, played for them. But inside, the notes cracked. Each night, he walked longer routes through the neighborhood, past corner stores and laundromats, playgrounds and apartment buildings. He kept an eye out for small shoes, bright braids, a lopsided backpack. He learned to recognize the routine faces of the block and noted when new ones appeared. He never found her. His music began to shift again. It darkened, slowly at first, like dusk creeping through an open window. He still played for the people, but they began to tilt their heads at the sadness hiding beneath the chords. One woman dropped a note in his case. "This made me cry. Thank you." Luca wanted to tear the note apart. He didn't want to make anyone cry. He wanted Aisha back. He wanted to hear her voice, off-key, unafraid. He wanted to see her sitting on the curb, drawing in her notebook, eyes wide with questions about music and dreams. He tried asking around. "Little girl, bright braids, carries a ukulele sometimes." Most shrugged. Some nodded vaguely. One older man outside a corner store said, "Could be one of the kids from the complex 2 blocks over. Some family with a bunch of kids and no dad. You know the one?" Luca did not. He went there anyway. The building was tall, brick, and tired. Most of the windows had curtains drawn shut. He stood outside, unsure of what he'd even say if someone answered. After a few minutes, he turned away. Then he heard a voice. "She's sick, you know." It came from a janitor dragging a bin of trash toward the alley. Luca turned. "What?" "The girl, the one who used to sit with you. I seen her around. Real quiet. Her mom's always working. They live on the 4th floor, but someone said she got taken to the hospital. Something with her heart." Luca's mouth went dry. "Which hospital?" The janitor shrugged. "Not sure. I just heard. But it was serious, I think. Ambulance came in the middle of the night, a few days ago." Luca stood frozen. The wind stirred the edge of his coat. His guitar case felt suddenly too heavy, like it was filled with bricks instead of strings. He whispered, "Do you know her name?" The janitor squinted. "Little Aisha, I think." That was all Luca needed. He spent the next day walking to every hospital in the borough. He asked at front desks, waited in lines, explained to nurses and receptionists that he was a family friend. "Just looking for Aisha, a girl about 7, maybe 8, admitted this week with heart trouble." Most shook their heads. Some asked for last names. He didn't have one. He almost gave up after the 5th hospital. But the 6th, a quiet pediatric wing with cartoon murals on the walls, was different. When he asked, the nurse looked hesitant. "You're not family?" "No," Luca said, "but she's everything." The nurse regarded him for a long moment. Then she said, "Wait here." 10 minutes later she returned and gestured him forward. "She's awake. Don't stay too long." The hallway to Aisha's room felt like a tunnel. He could hear the steady beep of monitors, the soft hush of nurses moving from room to room. He paused outside the door, heart pounding. When he stepped in, he saw her. She looked so small. Tubes trailed from her arms. A nasal cannula threaded beneath her nostrils. Her braids were loose, frizzed from sleep and days without care. Her skin was pale, a strange contrast to its usual glow, but her eyes were open. She saw him and smiled. "Hi," she said weakly. Luca swallowed the lump in his throat. "Hey, Songbird." "I heard you," she whispered, "from the metro." He stepped closer, pulled a chair beside her bed. "I haven't missed a day." She blinked slowly. "Good. I was listening. I just couldn't come." Her hand, small and trembling, reached toward the edge of the blanket. Luca took it gently in his own. "What happened?" She looked away. "My heart's broken, that's what they say." He closed his eyes. "Is it going to be okay?" "They don't know." Her voice cracked. "Mama cries a lot." Luca sat in silence. There were no songs for this. "I'm scared," she said quietly. He nodded. "Me too." They sat together for a long time, the machines humming their strange lullabies. Then Luca leaned forward and whispered, "You saved me, Aisha. You gave me back music. I didn't think I could feel joy again. Not until you showed up and started handing me candy bars like you were paying for tickets." She giggled faintly. He continued, "Now it's my turn." She looked confused. "For what?" "To save you." Her eyes widened. "Can you?" "I'll try." She fell asleep not long after, her hand still in his. A nurse came to check her IV and nodded silently to Luca, signaling he should leave soon. As he stood, Luca pulled something from his coat pocket, a tiny charm made of string and a bent guitar pick. He placed it on the table beside her. "I'll be back," he said, and then he left. The night outside was deep and cold, but Luca walked with purpose. His fingers ached not from the cold, but from the certainty of what he had to do. He couldn't fix hearts, but he could play, and now he would play louder than ever before, for her. The night Luca left the hospital, the wind had sharpened. It bit through his coat, sliced down his collar, but he barely felt it. His footsteps carried him through streets he barely saw. The image of Aisha, small, frail, brave, was etched into his mind, louder than any song. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his rented room, staring at the guitar lying across his knees, running his fingers across the wood like it was something fragile, sacred. His calloused hands shook. The girl who had saved him was slipping away, and he had no money, no contacts, no family. But he had one thing. He had music. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. By morning, the plan had taken shape. He needed help. The next day, Luca returned to the metro station, guitar in hand. He didn't take his usual place beneath the stairwell. Instead, he stood in the open plaza just outside, where the sun, gray as it was, could fall on him and the passing crowd. He unfolded a cardboard sign, scrawled in thick black marker. "Help Aisha. 7-year-old needs heart surgery. She saved me. Let me save her." Beside it, he placed a photo of the two of them, taken by a tourist weeks earlier. Luca seated on the curb, Aisha leaning on his shoulder, both smiling mid-song. Then he began to play. He played as he never had before, with urgency, with truth, with desperation woven into every chord. He played the lullabies he'd written for her, the songs they had sung together. His voice cracked with feeling. His fingers bled where calluses split from too much strumming. People stopped. At first, a few, then more. Some remembered the video from weeks before, the street musician and the little girl with the bright eyes and tiny ukulele. Now, the girl was gone from the street, and Luca's music carried a different weight. Coins filled the case quickly, then bills. Someone handed him a $100 note, no questions asked. Another came back with a thermos of coffee and a promise to share the story online. By midday, a local blogger approached, young, bright-eyed, phone always recording. "You're Luca, right? I saw you and the girl. What's going on?" He told her everything. By evening, the story was online, accompanied by a new video. Luca playing Aisha's song, a piece he'd composed just after teaching her her first chord. The video opened with Luca speaking into the camera. "She gave me back my voice. Now she needs us to help her find hers again." The post went viral within hours. The next morning, Luca woke to over 100 notifications. Someone had started a donation page. Someone else reached out from the local news. The cafe where he'd played asked if he'd like to host a benefit concert. "Yes," Luca said before they even finished asking. He spent the next 2 days organizing. He walked the city, handing out flyers. He called the woman from the record label and told her the story. She didn't hesitate. "We'll help," she said. "We'll match donations up to $25,000. It wasn't enough, not for full surgery and aftercare, but it was a start. The cafe cleared a weekend night for the show. They pushed the tables to the walls, brought in extra chairs. Luca invited every person he had ever played to, ever nodded at, ever thanked for a kind word. And most of all, he made sure the hospital would stream the show to Aisha's room. The night of the concert, the line wrapped around the block. Inside, the lights were warm, the air full of something electric. Luca stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause, but he only raised one hand and silenced the room. "I'm not here for me," he said. "I'm here for a little girl who gave me back my reason to live." Her name is Aisha. She is 7. She loves music. She believes in it the way children believe in stars, without hesitation, without fear. He paused, looking out over the crowd. She has a broken heart, and tonight we're going to try and fix it. Not with scalpels or medicine, we'll leave that to the doctors. But we can give her what she needs to get there. He played. Every song was a letter to Aisha. He sang the first melody they'd ever shared, the clumsy chord she strummed, the silly rhyme they once laughed over. The audience was silent, some crying, some swaying. Then, when he played her song, the one she never got to finish, people stood. They clapped, they sang along, even if they didn't know the words. By the final note, Luca's voice was hoarse, his fingers stiff. But his heart had never been fuller. The applause was deafening. Outside the cafe, volunteers held jars for cash. Inside, QR codes flashed on the wall behind him, linking to the donation page. The number climbed in real time: $5,000, $8,000, $12,000, $25,000, and then the match, $50,000. Luca stood at the edge of the stage, overwhelmed. He couldn't speak. A man came forward, a producer from a regional label, and said, "I want to turn tonight into an album. We'll give all proceeds to the fund." Luca nodded, stunned. Later that night, as the crowd dispersed and the cafe dimmed its lights, Luca sat alone on the edge of the stage, guitar still in his lap. He checked his coat pocket. Aisha's latest drawing still tucked inside, its edges soft from wear. He smiled. He went to the hospital the next morning. The nurse met him with a smile. She watched the whole thing. Luca stepped quietly into Aisha's room. She was sitting up, eyes brighter. "Was that really all for me?" she asked, voice still thin. "All of it," he said, sitting beside her. "And it's only the beginning." She looked at him, serious now. "Do you think it'll work?" He nodded. "It already is." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small case. Inside, a tiny pink ukulele rested against soft velvet. It had a heart-shaped cutout in the body and her name etched in silver ink just above the sound hole. "For you," Luca said, "for when you're ready to play again." Aisha's fingers touched the strings. Her smile came slowly, but it lit the room. "You remembered," she whispered. "I always will." Outside the hospital window, the city moved as it always had, indifferent, hurrying, vast. But inside, in a room filled with chords and hope, a new melody was already beginning. Years passed. Not many, just enough for everything to change. The city was still the same on the surface, its streets noisy, its subways full of the usual rush. People hurried from place to place, heads bowed under the weight of time and responsibility. But if you paid close attention, something subtle had shifted. The station by the metro still hosted musicians, but now travelers often paused just a little longer, wondering if they might be witnessing the start of something special. After all, they remembered what had begun there once before. Luca was no longer the nameless man in the shadows of the stairwell. His name was known, at least locally, spoken in cafes, printed on flyers, whispered backstage in clubs where folk music met soul and jazz and something all his own. He had released an album, not in a flashy way, not with loud promotion, but recorded with care and warmth. All proceeds still went to a fund named after her, the Aisha Foundation, dedicated to supporting children with heart conditions and giving them access to music therapy. But Luca hadn't changed much in the ways that mattered. He still played the streets sometimes, just for the feel of it, for the memory. He still carried Aisha's first drawing in his coat, now laminated and worn at the corners. He still believed that music could save people, because once it had saved them both. And now, tonight, he stood backstage once again. This time it was Central Park's Summer Festival, an outdoor concert lined with fairy lights and folding chairs, with rows of families gathered on blankets and picnic baskets beneath the night sky. Luca was the closing act. The organizers had wanted a spectacle. Luca had offered something better. "Just light the stage," he told them. "The rest will take care of itself." He stood in the wings, adjusting the strap of his guitar, breathing slowly. He wasn't nervous anymore. He was waiting. Out front, thousands waited too, some who knew the story, some who'd only heard pieces of it, and some who had no idea what they were about to witness. The announcer stepped forward and tapped the microphone. "Our final performer needs no introduction. But tonight's performance is about more than music. It's about a journey of healing, of friendship, of hope. And it's about the girl who stood beside him before anyone else did." A hush fell over the crowd. "Please welcome Luca and a very special guest." Luca stepped out into the lights. The applause was loud, warm, familiar. He waved, smiled, let it settle. Then he leaned toward the microphone. "Thank you," he said. "I've played a lot of stages since that first winter outside the Metro. But none as important as this one. Because tonight, I'm not playing alone." He stepped aside. From the opposite wing, a figure appeared. She walked slowly at first, her pace steady and graceful. She was taller now, her face no longer round with childhood but still unmistakably her. The same light in her eyes, the same steady gaze, now framed by long braids laced with tiny silver beads that glinted under the lights. She carried the same pink ukulele, now faded with use, the heart-shaped cutout still perfectly intact. The crowd rose to their feet. Aisha smiled shyly, but stood tall beside Luca, nodding at him before turning to the audience. Luca looked at her and said simply, "You ready?" She nodded. "Always." They began to play. The opening chords were soft, familiar, a song born years ago on a cracked sidewalk between a broken man and a little girl with stars in her eyes. The melody grew stronger as they played, Luca's deep, textured voice weaving through Aisha's clear, bright harmony. She strummed gently, confidently, her rhythm sure. Her voice, still sweet but now controlled, full, rang out across the park. The song was a celebration of pain survived, of hope discovered, of a friendship that began with a single note. When they finished, the silence held for a moment, like the air itself had stopped to breathe. Then the crowd erupted. They stood, clapped, some crying, some cheering, some simply holding each other in quiet awe. Not because of the fame, not because of the music's perfection, but because they had witnessed something real. Luca turned to Aisha, eyes glistening. "You were perfect," he whispered. She laughed softly. "Told you I'd play on stage one day." He smiled. "I never doubted it." They walked off together, leaving the applause behind them like a tide rolling to shore. Later, under the trees behind the stage, Luca sat on a bench, guitar resting beside him. Aisha joined him, ukulele in her lap. The night was quiet now, the lights low. They sat in a comfortable silence, the kind shared only by those who have been through storms together. "You know," Luca said after a while, "when you didn't show up that morning, I thought I'd lost everything again." Aisha looked at him. "You didn't. I was just waiting for you to find me." He nodded slowly. "You gave me back my voice, and you gave me the strength to use mine." They sat there for a long time, the music finished, but the melody still lingering in the air between them. The world spun on, but two hearts, once broken, now mended, kept beating in time. And far above, among the stars, the city lights flickered like notes on a page, part of a song that would never truly end. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Watch the next video. The best part might still be ahead. And share this one with someone who needs to see it.